Hey, how's it going? Dave here. Welcome to part 3 of my Basic Music Theory for Guitar Players video series. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about pretty much the foundation of Western music as we know it, the major scale. So before we talk specifically about the major scale, let's first go over the concept of scales as a whole and why we should care about them. So what is a scale? Well, essentially, a scale is just a sequence of notes ordered by their pitch. If you've been through my previous video on intervals, then we already touched on one particular scale, which was the chromatic scale. And we learned that the chromatic scale contains all 12 notes and moves up in a sequence of semitones or half steps. So no matter what instrument you play, you're going to come across scales. And if you've ever actually sat down and tried to learn some scales before, you've probably thought to yourself, man, this is boring as shit. And I'd agree, they're pretty boring, let's be honest. However, there's a lot of good reasons why you should learn them and why you should start trying to understand them. From the bigger general standpoint, scales are pretty much the building blocks for all music. They allow us to build chords, understand and play melodies, compose, improvise, help us know what key a piece of music is in, and also help us understand what notes work well together and which ones to use over harmonic changes. A great analogy I heard a while back was to think of a piece of music as a story, and the individual notes of a scale as words from which we can construct sentences and paragraphs. So, in other words, scales are kind of like your musical vocabulary. For the guitar, scales are going to help you build finger strength, develop your ear, construct chords, improvise, write music, learn songs, the list goes on. There's a ton of reasons why scales can be really valuable to you as a guitar player. So if anyone tries to tell you, you don't need to know scales to play the guitar, well, the truth is, whether you know it or not, you're using scales, especially if you're playing solos. So the better question would be, would you rather know what you're playing so you can actually be more free with your creativity, or would you rather just keep playing the same patterns that you memorized over and over again? So two very important words when it comes to scales, diatonic and chromatic. Diatonic basically means we're in key. So if a scale or a melody is diatonic, this means that all the notes generally stay within a specific key. Chromatic simply means there's no fixed key. So if you saw my previous video where we touched on the chromatic scale, you'll know that that scale contains every possible note in Western music. It's a free-for-all. You can literally play whatever you want. And if you've never heard music that's completely chromatic before, it's pretty interesting. Obviously you can throw the occasional chromatic note in with a diatonic scale, just to add a bit of colour, which can actually be a really great tool for spicing up your licks and solos. Now although the chromatic scale is kind of out there, it does do a great job of actually explaining to us how scales work. Because every other scale you could possibly have is essentially the chromatic scale with some notes taken out. So if we take the chromatic scale from the note C, not in the key of C, because remember the chromatic scale contains every note, so we can't have a fixed key. But we've got to start the scale from somewhere, and this will help us when we finally get to the major scale. So we're starting from C, and we're just going to play every single note until we get back round to C again, an octave higher. And it should sound something like this. Kind of weird, I know. But like I said, every other scale is pretty much the chromatic scale with some notes left out. So how do we know which notes to leave out and which notes to keep in? Well, that's where scale patterns come in. A great way to think about scales is as different patterns of notes. These patterns help us to construct scales from any key. And the first scale pattern I'm going to talk about is, of course, the whole half pattern of the major scale. So quickly, before we learn how to construct a major scale, I'll define what I mean by whole and half. Whole meaning whole tone or whole step, which in music means to go up by 2 notes. And on the guitar, we just go up by 2 frets. Half meaning half step or semitone. So in music, we go up by 1 note. So on the guitar, we go up by 1 fret. So the pattern for a major scale is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Or you might see it written as tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. I can't stress to you enough how important it is for you to become familiar with this scale pattern, so I really encourage you to memorize it and ingrain it into your memory. So now let's take this pattern or formula and construct a major scale. And we can construct a major scale in any key, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to be constructing a C major scale, purely because the key of C major contains no sharps and flats, and we kind of want to eliminate any of those things that are going to confuse us when we learn this stuff for the first time. Okay, so the C major scale. First, we need to play our tonic or root note, which is of course C. So 8th fret on the low E string. Following our scale pattern, we know our next note is a whole step up. or 2 frets, which gives us the note D. Next we have another whole step, takes us to E, 7th fret on the A string. Half step now, 1 fret, which takes us to F. Whole step to G, 2 frets. Whole step to A, moving on to the D string on the 7th fret. Another whole step to B. And finally, another half step, which brings us back to our root note of C in our 2nd octave. We're going to repeat that same pattern in the next octave to play the entire scale across every string. And altogether it should sound something like this. So if we compare our C major scale to the chromatic scale, we can see that all we've done is simply remove 5 notes from the chromatic scale using our major scale formula. So to construct a major scale in any key, first we need to identify what key we actually want to play in. From there, we just follow the pattern of whole steps and half steps. So let's do that. Let's try and create an A major scale. So first we need to identify our key, which in this case is A, known as our tonic or root note. And from there, we just follow the pattern of whole steps and half steps. So A is our tonic, the note we start from. So 5th fret on the low E string. Whole step up to B. Whole step up to C sharp. Half step up to D. Whole step up to E. Whole step up to F sharp. Whole step up to G sharp. And finally, a half step back to A. And there you have it. We've just created the A major scale. So now we've learned how to construct a major scale in any key, the next thing to do is learn how to play it all over the neck in its 7 different positions. The reason for learning scales all over the neck is so we're not bound to one position. If you can identify where the notes of a scale are all over the fretboard, that means you can access them where you need them without jumping back and forth to different areas of the neck. Now I am going to show you how to play all 7 positions of the major scale across the neck, but first I just want to show you a cool little trick so you can kind of figure them out for yourself without having to rely on scale diagrams and memorizing a bunch of shapes. Each of the 7 positions of the major scale, or any scale in fact, start from a different degree or note of the scale. So if we go back to our whole half pattern of the major scale on only the low E string, we can now find the starting notes for all 7 positions. Again, this works in any key, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to demonstrate the major scale in the key of G, purely so we don't run out of frets as we go up and have to jump back and forth for different positions. So starting with our tonic or root note, G, 3rd fret of the low E string. Using our major scale formula, we know to go up a whole step, takes us to A. Another whole step to B. A half step to C. A whole step to D. Whole step to E. Whole step to F sharp. And finally, a half step back to G. So by knowing the G major scale on the low E string, we now know the starting notes for each position of the G major scale all over the neck. So root position starts from G, 3rd fret. 2nd position starts from A, 5th fret. 3rd position from B, 7th fret. 4th position from C, 8th fret. 5th position from D, 10th fret. 6th position from E, 12th fret. And 7th position from F sharp, 13th fret. Then we're back to our root position, an octave up on the 15th fret. As each position starts from a different scale degree, all we need to do is simply modify our scale formula depending on the note we start from. For example, our second position starts from A, which is the second note or degree of the G major scale. We just start our formula from the second note. This works for all 7 positions of the major scale, but just remember the note or the degree that you start from will dictate where you start within your whole step, half step pattern. So I encourage you to have a mess around with these, try and construct a major scale in loads of different keys, and from there figure out all 7 positions. Phew. Now that's out of the way, I'm just going to show you how to play the G major scale all over the neck in 7 different positions. I'll also put the scale diagram somewhere on the screen for you to follow along. Okay, so that's all for this lesson. Keep going over it if you need to. Like I always say, it's really important to get to grips with this stuff. It's going to make your life a lot easier as you progress further. And like we said earlier, the major scale is pretty much the foundation of most Western music, so it's really important for you to get your head around this. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Helps me know that you guys are receiving some value from these videos as well. And we'll see you in the next one, where we're going to be talking about the diatonic chord progression. So basically building chords from the major scale. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again. Take care.